There are people who, when love approaches, don't react as expected. They don't smile immediately. They don't throw themselves into anyone's arms. They take a step back. They withdraw a little, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much. When someone shows interest in them, their instinct is not to open the door, but to lock it. They become elusive, almost invisible, and from the outside, it appears rejected. It seems they don't want to love or be loved, but in reality, it's quite the opposite. These souls don't fear love because they don't desire it, but because they feel it in its rawest and truest form. They perceive it as a tremor that shakes everything they thought they had under control. They don't seek half measures or temporary refuges. They silently yearn for a connection that doesn't hurt, a presence that doesn't shatter, something that transcends words. As Jung said, the gifts of the soul aren't displayed with a bang. They're hidden in contradictions. And one of the most sacred gifts belongs to those who fear to love, because they know that giving themselves completely would transform them forever. It's not that they don't want to love, it's that they know the power of true love, the kind that is never forgotten. These souls don't seek out people, they seek frequencies. They don't connect with just anyone, not out of pride, but because they can no longer tolerate the false disguise of affection. As Jung said, some souls have such a deep emotional memory that a single experience awakens an ancient wisdom. And for those who fear love, that wisdom acts as a filter. They no longer fall for sweet words or pretty promises. They seek, almost unknowingly, an honest, unmasked presence. That fear that others mistake for coldness is, in reality, a warning from the soul. They don't surrender if they feel their essence will be distorted. It's not fear, it's awareness. It's a gift. Their intuition is precise, even if they sometimes try to silence it. They feel every gesture, every absence, every contradiction as a direct wound. They are not fragile, they are profound. And in that depth, love is no longer a pretty promise. It's a force that transforms or destroys. That's why they seem afraid. That's why they hide. Because they don't know how to love the halfway. Because when they love, they give everything, and they know it. Carl Jung called it an unconscious form of soul protection. As if that wiser part living in the invisible realm knew exactly when surrender would lead to growth, and when it would mean self-betrayal. And here is where the gift becomes clearer. Very few have the strength to resist the urge to love when their soul senses the path is not yet pure. Not everyone knows how to wait, to observe, to feel, and if needed, to withdraw silently. This soul is not running from love. It's guarding something sacred, because even though it longs for connection, it refuses to betray itself again. The one who fears love doesn't do so out of weakness, but because they've come to understand its power. They've experienced what it's like to give themselves completely and then pick up the pieces left behind. But that experience didn't harden them. It made them more aware. They don't shut down, they just choose not to repeat. And in that choice lies a profound gift. Knowing how to recognize true love, not by what it says, but by how it vibrates. They no longer seek intensity, but depth, not theatrical gestures. It awakens through lived experience, through loss, through the silent watching of one's soul as it rebuilds itself from what once was rubble. There's something subtle, yet incredibly strong, about these souls. They know when love is inviting them to bloom, and when instead it's trying to erase them. That difference, imperceptible to many, is felt by them as an instant vibration, an invisible signal that cuts right through the chest before the mind has a chance to shape a single thought. And that is why they step back. Not because they don't want to, they aren't afraid of falling in love. They're afraid of losing what they've rebuilt with such care. They've learned, sometimes painfully, that not everything intense lasts, and that not everything bright is true light. Their gift isn't revealed in wise words or grand gestures, but in silent choices that few notice, in firm boundaries without explanation, in goodbyes that hurt but are liberating, because they understand that loving isn't disappearing, it's also including themselves. And if love demands forgetting themselves, then it isn't love, it's another form of abandonment. That's why they may seem cold, distant, perhaps even hard to understand for those who experience love as an urgent force. But in truth, they are loyal to an inner fire they refuse to extinguish just to meet someone else's expectations. Carl Jung might say, these people have awakened a deep archetype, an inner figure that drives them to seek truly meaningful bonds. And that archetype has one single command: never offer your soul where your soul cannot grow. These souls, those who fear love, yet feel it with sacred intensity, have a different way of experiencing attraction. They don't follow the rush of the moment. They don't fall into desire like someone chasing quick relief. To them, an emotional bond is a doorway into entirely new realms, and they won't walk through it unless they're sure they'll return whole. That's why, when someone approaches them from a shallow place, they sense it immediately. They don't need time to decode intentions. Their sensitivity is so sharp, so tuned, it sometimes becomes painful. And something extraordinary happens when these souls find a love that doesn't disturb their peace, a love that doesn't ask more than they can give, a love that arrives without the urge to possess or reshape them. Something deep awakens, because even if they seem closed off, what they're really waiting for is to be seen as they are, without explanation, without hiding their sensitivity. That kind of love, when it comes, never needs to knock loudly. It only takes a whisper from the truth. And then, everything shifts. Fear transforms into guidance. Distance turns into a slow unfolding. And the soul, once afraid to surrender, begins to bloom with a tenderness that moves the heart. Those who fear love so deeply don't lack the desire for it. They feel it too much, too profoundly. It's not that they refuse to love. It's just that they sense, instinctively, that loving, truly loving, would tear open places in them not everyone could hold with care, so they become guardians of their own soul. And that self-protection, often mistaken for coldness, is in fact a very elevated kind of love, a devotion to their own essence, to their inner quiet, to their sacred process. These are not people who seek love to fill a hole. They don't find comfort in what burns fast and fades. Their longing for emotional truth runs so deep that anything fake, any rushed promise, any desperate urgency stirs a visceral discomfort. Not from arrogance, but because they sense when someone uses love as an escape rather than as a path to expansion. They don't need promises of forever. They only need to feel that this connection doesn't dim their light, that they don't have to hide, that they can be as sensitive, as deep, as intense as they truly are. That moment when they let their guard down and allow themselves to be loved, without disguise or defense, is one of the bravest acts there is, because they've fought hard to rebuild themselves, and choosing to trust again with no guarantees takes an inner strength few can understand. And when they do it, When they finally allow someone to cross the boundary they've protected for so long, they don't love in ordinary ways. The way they love carries a kind of purity that moves people. They don't demand, they don't manipulate, they don't strategize, they don't seek to possess or to be constantly validated. They're simply present with their entire being. They offer companionship that doesn't suffocate, a kind of listening that doesn't judge, and a devotion that doesn't beg for anything. That kind of giving, raw, unmasked, uncalculated, is rare in this world, because they don't try to shine to impress. They shine without effort, from the very center of their truth. And it's that truth that transforms everything: the other person, the relationship, the shared space. And what's most astonishing is that they never boast about this gift. They're not even fully aware of the impact they have on those around them. Their love isn't loud, but it leaves deep, lasting traces. They don't seek attention, yet they're impossible to forget. There's something rare in the way they look at someone they love. They don't just see who you are now, they see what you're capable of becoming. They recognize the wounded soul behind your defenses, the quiet light hiding beneath your fear, the hidden strength buried under your pain. And if they choose to stay, it's not to rescue you, but to walk beside you, so you can discover your own strength, your own truth, your own power. They don't demand you to change, but their presence alone inspires transformation. Still, if they ever feel it's time to go, they'll leave with the same grace they once gave their love. No drama, no pleading. They simply don't remain where resonance no longer exists. They love deeply because they know themselves even more deeply. They don't seek acceptance, but rather to share from their inner abundance. They have experienced emotional loss, and so they now approach love with intention, listening, and awareness. They don't give themselves away to disappear, but to grow in connection. Before saying yes, they ask themselves if this connection honors them or extinguishes them. Their love isn't loud, but it is honest, without masks or fear of loneliness. And although it may seem silent, it leaves a profound mark on those who know how to recognize it. That's why, when these souls love, they inspire, not through action, but through presence. Their way of relating to the world is a gentle reminder to return to center, to stop chasing hollow promises, to stop searching for love in places where it never had roots. And those who've ever been loved by one of these souls know it. It doesn't matter how much time has passed or how much their life has changed. There is a mark that remains, not because of what was said or done, but because of what was stirred. Because this kind of soul doesn't love to be noticed. They love because they cannot help but feel. Because something inside them pulses, even when they try to silence it. And that pulse doesn't seek attention or quick replies. It's a steady presence that observes, holds space, feels, and if the other is ready, it gently blooms. But if not, if the other still hides behind masks, if their heart isn't open to a love that reaches every layer, then it withdraws, not out of pride, not to punish, but from wisdom. Because those who carry this spiritual gift understand that love cannot take root in barren soil, not from lack of hope, but out of reverence. Reverence for their own heart, reverence for the other's timing, reverence for the mystery of what's still becoming. That's why these souls may seem cold, distant, unreachable, but in truth, they feel deeply, so deeply that any dissonance tears through their soul. And they've learned, often through pain, that not all that shines is worthy of surrender, and not every offer of love is free from need. And in that knowing lies their silent strength. They may seem alone, but they're accompanied by an inner clarity that guides every step, an inner voice, not always easy to follow, yet one that prevents them from betraying their essence. That is their true gift, not loving less, but loving with awareness, not closing off from connection, but only opening when truth is present, not shielding themselves out of fear, but out of sacred loyalty to their soul. These souls don't enter relationships to be completed, but to expand. And although they have known the pain of loving without being truly seen, they have also learned not to settle. They wait calmly, trusting that truth is not pursued, it is recognized. Because of this, they can experience deep connections and healing silences. But if love begins to demand that they cease to be who they are, they leave. Not for lack of love, but because they chose to respect themselves. Without fuss, without explanations, only with the peace of those who have learned to stop in time. That departure is not escape, it's devotion. Devotion to their own pace, to their own center, to that sacred inner space they are no longer willing to trade for romantic love. And here, something magical happens. When these souls choose not to betray themselves, they begin to attract different relationships, slower, deeper, more honest. Relationships where they don't have to hide their wounds or apologize for their sensitivity, where they are free to show up as they are, vast, emotional, layered, yet real. That is the invisible reward of their gift. Because having feared love does not mean they never longed for it. It means they've looked it in the eye and seen its power to transform, but also its ability to destroy if offered in the wrong place. And that's why these souls don't give themselves to just anyone. They've come to understand that love, in order to heal, must be met with the same depth. These souls move through the world with a sensitivity as finely tuned as an ancient instrument. They perceive nuances others overlook. They catch the silences between words, the feelings left unsaid, the motives tucked beneath a smile, not because they're suspicious, but simply because they feel more. They feel faster, deeper, more honestly. That's why anyone who dares to love one of these souls must be brave enough to be transparent. They don't expect perfection, but they demand truth. They don't care if you've stumbled, if your wounds are still open, if you're still learning how to love fully. What they can't tolerate is dishonesty dressed as kindness, manipulation wrapped in gestures of affection, or the mismatch between words and actions. And this is where the most sacred part of their gift reveals itself. When they love deeply, they awaken something in the other person, not because they try, not because they teach, but because their very presence, so true to itself, so aware, so awake, acts like a mirror that unsettles, that reveals, that invites reflection. Many people run when they see themselves reflected there. Some people stay, and those who dare to stay with such a soul are transformed. Loving them isn't easy, but forgetting them is impossible. Their presence leaves a mark, even in silence, even when they're gone, because they've faced the fear of love and still choose to love truly, without deception. They don't make noise, but they leave a mark. They don't seek validation, because their inner coherence already radiates strength. They arrive without seeking attention, but something always changes when they're near. Conversations begin to take on a more honest tone. The masks grow uncomfortable, and emotions become easier to read, even if no one says them out loud. This sensitivity wasn't something these souls sought after. It was born from their wounds, from their losses, from everything that forced them to look inward. while others were still chasing distractions on the outside. They told themselves they didn't need anyone, but deep down, they were simply waiting for the right time, the right frequency, the right soul. Because for these people, love is not just a spark. It's a sacred act. They don't offer their light to just anyone, because they know how heavy it can be to carry. And when they finally choose to love, they love without holding back, but always with deep awareness. They feel every misalignment, every inconsistency, every shadow that's still hiding. Not because they're looking for faults, but because they've learned that love is a spiritual path. They're not just interested in closeness, they crave connection. It's not enough to feel safe, they want to be changed. That is their true gift, not loving without fear, but loving in spite of it, and still choosing to go all in, with a depth that awakens, purifies, and frees. Because their love doesn't offer easy happiness. It offers a truth that shakes you, but heals you. And it's that quiet truth that leaves others most unsettled. While others demand explanations, these souls walk away the moment they feel their essence can no longer breathe inside a connection. They don't cause scenes. They're not drawn to drama, yet their absence speaks louder than any scream. They leave without saying a word, but the imprint they leave behind is unforgettable. This kind of sensitivity is not something everyone knows how to hold. Some interpret it as coldness, others as apathy, but in truth, it's a kind of love so sincere it refuses to pretend. These people don't know how to love halfway, nor can they lie to themselves just to hold on to something that no longer feels true inside. When something stops resonating deeply, no matter how much it hurts, they let go. Because their loyalty isn't to others, it's to their own soul. They do not seek multiple relationships. They're searching for resonance. And when they find it, they open doors to worlds others didn't even know existed. They have this quiet ability to touch what's invisible in another person, to awaken old memories with just one glance, to carry someone else's pain as if it were their own, and still stay calm through it all. They aren't perfect, nor do they want to be, but they've turned their sensitivity into a compass. And though they may lose their way sometimes, they always return to that inner space where everything becomes clear, where the soul knows when to move forward, when to pause, and when to walk away. And when one of these souls chooses to stay, they do so from such an intimate place. It's disarming. They don't need promises or dramatic declarations. They want to be loved in a real, grounded way. What they long for is authenticity, that what's said is felt, that what's promised is honored, that what's offered carries the lightness of choice, not the weight of obligation. So when they love, it's never to be saved. It's to grow together with someone. There's no need to pretend. When they finally find that kind of space, something inside them begins to bloom, gently but powerfully, healing not just the connection, but the person in front of them. Because being close to someone who has faced their fear of love is like touching the truth with your own hands. That's their rarest gift, the ability to love from the root, without trapping, without owning, without losing themselves, to love from that sacred space where the soul no longer fears, but simply recognizes. And when they love from there, it's not about intensity, it's about presence. A presence that doesn't overwhelm, doesn't demand, doesn't impose, but somehow still transforms. Because the way they look at you, listen to you, feel you, reveals they've lived many lives within this one. And every past wound has taught them not how to hurt, but how to avoid hurting others. Being near one of these souls is like standing before a mirror, not one that distorts, but one that reveals. They don't judge. They don't try to fix you. They don't mold you. They see you. They see you even when you're still learning how to show yourself. Their sensitivity isn't weakness, it's a compass, one that always points toward what's real. And in their way of seeing, they also protect themselves, because even though they feel deeply, they don't give it all away at once. Their love is like a sacred fire, carefully guarded, offered only when they sense it will be honored. Not because they fear rejection, but because they know the cost of handing their soul to hands that can't hold it. This spiritual gift they carry, those who have feared love yet followed their soul's call, gives them a near invisible way of perceiving the world. They hear what isn't said. They feel what others try to hide. That's why they don't fall for appearances. They've learned to see beyond the surface. And when they choose to walk beside someone, it's not out of impulse. It's because something within them aligns, because they know that encounter isn't random. That connection holds something far greater than attraction, far deeper than similarity. It's a shared purpose, a resonance between souls, a feeling of home that words will never explain. So if you ever meet someone who loves you gently, who doesn't invade but is always there, who says little but speaks everything with their presence, you might be standing before one of these souls. And if you are one of them, you've probably known it all along. Your way of loving doesn't belong to this era, but it's exactly what this world is longing for. And even if you felt like your love is too much, your depth too heavy, your emotions too vast, you are not broken. You are simply different, tuned to a frequency not everyone hears. But when someone does, it shifts their soul. Because you don't love out of need. You love from resonance. You don't look for someone to fill a void. You share from your abundance. You won't be drawn to games, but to real connection. The fear of love didn't make you cold. It made you wise. Your emotional wisdom, born of silence, of transformed pain, is your greatest gift. It has developed an internal radar that recognizes what doesn't resonate with your truth. You no longer need proof or empty gestures. You feel what's authentic and peacefully move away from what isn't. Your love is patient, silent, and profound. It doesn't expect intensity, but depth. It doesn't seek promises, but presence. That's why those who lose you can't explain it. They don't understand how someone so discreet can leave such an immense absence. But you left your mark. A soul that loves from a place of healing leaves echoes, even unintentionally. And you left them with your vivid intuition and luminous sensitivity. Even if you sometimes feel like you don't fit in with how the world loves, remember, those rules weren't made for awakened souls, and yours is very awakened. If these words have resonated with you, you are not alone. There are other souls like yours who love with an open heart and eyes closed to the ego. Leave me a comment and tell me if you've ever felt something similar. And if you know someone who's afraid of loving because they've loved too much, share it. Maybe this is just what their soul needs. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming. See you in the next video.